Hi, we're Quentin Curious Volumes. My name is James. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a book that I read for Octember, which is an event in the month of September where a bunch of us here on YouTube are reading books about cephalopods. Your octopuses, your squids, your cuttlefish, your Cthulhu's, or your miscellaneous tentacle-equipped beings. And so far, we've had a lot of participation. I'm really happy to see how many people are reading about and posting about their cephalopod reading. Steve Donahue did a review of a work of tentacle fiction called Tentacle Desert. Hannah from Hannah's Books posted about what did she read? The Remarkably Bright Creatures, the novel, and a novel called Lily and the Octopus. I know that this book here, Other Minds, is on her list. Pat from Book Chat with Pat has posted about The Mountain and the Sea, which sounds like a fascinating science fiction novel about a society of octopuses. Anyway, I'm going to tell you today about Other Minds, and this is a book that's been out for quite a while. It's about 10 years old, and it's by Peter Godfrey-Smith, who is apparently a distinguished professor of philosophy and professor of the history and philosophy of science. So from that description and from the subtitle, The Octopus, the Sea, and the Deep Origins of Consciousness, this may seem kind of an intimidating work. It is really very well written, very approachable. It's not, you're not going to find yourself adrift in a sea of philosophical jargon or anything like that. Though that doesn't mean that there's no rigor to it. I mean, this is very much grounded in philosophy, but even more in evolution and biology and what a lot of recent research on cephalopods has taught us, or at least recent up to 2015 or so when this was written, when this was published. And Peter Godfrey-Smith also is an experienced diver and undersea photographer. So this book is full of original photography that he's taken of octopuses and cuttlefish in their natural habitat. Some of it throughout, and then some of it in a section in the middle of color plates. So this is but let me just tell you briefly, what it's about. It's the individual chapters. A lot of them would stand on their own as essays, and they may have been published like that. But I'll go through them there. So the first one, Meetings Across the Tree of Life, is basically talks about the evolution of different species, and you know how. If you know about evolution, it's often described by a metaphor of a tree, right, with branches. So you'll have two species with a common ancestor, right? We all know that humans and chimpanzees are very closely related. At some point in the past, so humans are here, chimpanzees are here at some point in the past. So when you're going down in one of these charts, you're going back in time. There's a common ancestor here that gave birth to offspring that eventually became what we now call chimpanzees and what we now call modern humans. And if you go far enough back, you will find a common ancestor between humans and octopuses, but you have to go very, very far past. So that makes it kind of interesting that these two species have evolved consciousness, and that the octopuses and other cephalopods, which are mollusks, which are very far back, that these two species have both evolved consciousness, or that these two families, I suppose, but clades, let's say, because I'm not sure of all the levels of Linnaean classification, but how different the consciousnesses must be. And so there's some of this phenomenological talk about what it's like to be an octopus, but really, I mean, that's one of the things that's so interesting about it, right? We know that they're intelligent, we know they solve problems, we know that they recognize individuals, and we know that they have personality, sense of humor, something like that. But we also know that their brains are structured so differently than ours, and that their neurons are not just in their head, but they're also distributed throughout their limbs, their system of those fascinating arms with the suckers that seem to have a mind of their own and can do so many fascinating things. So I'm just going to be gushing about how cool cephalopods are, I guess. Then you have the history of animals, which is really more of that sort of evolutionary talk. Then mischief and craft, and here he talks about these discoveries of sort of ancient fossils of cephalopods, pre-octopus cephalopods that were found in a desert in Australia of all places, and what that can sort of tell us about the modern evolution of it, and I don't remember what that is. And then you have from white noise to consciousness. Now this is interesting because it sort of it describes this hypothesis that consciousness came out of evolved out of a sort of non-consciousness. There are a lot of unintelligent cephalopods and mollusks and creatures. Most of the other mollusks, and a lot of the other invertebrates do not really have a consciousness, a sense of self. So their thought process, such as it is equated to a kind of white noise, where the creature can get stimulus and sort of react sort of in an automatic way, but without any kind of strategy or weighting of options or anything like that. Let's see. Why do I keep turning the page from the table of contents since I'm trying to go through it? And making colors. Now this is fascinating. One of the first things you learn about octopus is, and it is also true of cuttlefish, is that they can change their coloration. And octopus are known for being able to blend in with the background very effectively, not just in the color, but in the texture of their skin. They can sort of have these ridges and protuberances. How does that work? How do they produce so many different colors? And he explains that there are sort of 3 different layers of types of cells under the surface of their skin that interact in different and produce different sets of colors, and that can reflect things. Now here's what's interesting, is that octopuses are colorblind. They do not detect color, but they create color, and color that can blend with their surroundings. How do they do this? At the time of this publication, they still don't really know, but they suspect it has something to do with the reflective cells. And they have 2 different kinds of reflective cells in their skin. And that may have something to do with how they can effectively mimic the color. And they can also mimic color differently on different parts of their body. So an octopus or a squid can have sort of a camouflage coloration on one side and sort of a messaging coloration on the other that they're displaying to another creature, another cephalopod that they are friends with, acquainted with, that they know is over here. Amazing. Okay. There's also this sort of section where he talks about baboons, and squids, which you'll have to read. Look, you've got to read this book. Okay, Experience Compressed. This is fascinating because if another thing you learn very quickly when you start becoming an octopus geek is that they have very short lifespans. 1 year to 4 years on the outside. For ones that we know their lifespan. We don't know the lifespan of all species. But the giant Pacific octopus seems to have the longest one that we know of, and that's about 4 years. And most of the common octopuses live for about a year. How do they learn so much in such a short span of time? Why do they learn so much if their lifespan is going to be so short? And his hypothesis, I don't know that I'm really able to restate it to you, but it is that when you develop an intelligence, if you have a short lifespan, you might have things in your genome that are going to be disadvantageous later on, but you won't know because you have a short lifespan. I'm really just describing this badly. I'm doing a bad job. Anyway, their intelligence makes it possible for them to survive in their short lifespan, because they have to sort of scuttle about on the floor of the sea. They don't have a lot of natural defenses besides their intelligence, right? They don't have scales. They do have the ability to escape things very, very quickly, very facilely, but they don't have teeth. They don't have bones. They don't have a shell, right? It's just all flesh, right? And so if they get bit, they're bit, right? So if you saw My Octopus Teacher, you saw that the cephalopod protagonist of that short film was attacked and did survive, but it took its toll on that octopus. And anyway, and at the end he has a chapter on Octopus, which is really, really cool. It's basically a spot in the Pacific Ocean where at some point something fell off a boat and landed on the sea floor, and an octopus used it to as a source of shelter. Octopuses tend to like to, when they're not out hunting for food, sort of hang out in a den. And so this octopus made a den out of this piece of junk that fell off a boat. And it was an effective den, and this octopus ate a bunch of scallops, because that was the locally available octopus food. And so the shells sort of started to accumulate on top of and around this piece of junk. And then enough scallop shells accumulated that other octopuses were able to make their own dens in this big pile of scallop shells. And they expanded it, as you might imagine, sort of exponentially. And over the years, this kind of big, vast plain of, and he probably tells you how big it is, and I don't remember, of scallop shells, which is filled with octopuses. And they are generally solitary creatures, but they've evolved a sort of octopus society. They relate to each other socially within this Octopolis, this city of octopuses, which is just great. Yeah, I gotta say, look, if you're into octopus, you've got to read this book. Put it on your list. Peter Godfrey-Jones, if you haven't read it already. Godfrey-Smith. It seems like most octopus people have read this. I call myself an octopus person, but I'm a poser, right? That's why that's why I invented Octember, so I could get myself caught up. I'm so glad you joined us. I'm so glad you're taking part. If you are and you're watching, have you read this one? What do you think of it? Or what else are you reading for Octember? All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.